Hello, my name is Layton. I'm an intuitive and a mystic, but I also talk a lot about physiology and neurobiology, usually through the lens of occult anatomy. But today we are just talking about neurobiology, social media, and mind control. The reason why is because I'm actually going to have a part 2 where we go into the esoteric side of things. However, I have noticed that in the occult realm, there are so many people talking about this from their own occult paths and kind of how they see things from an esoteric standpoint, but it's not always very accessible to people who maybe don't understand the dangers of social media or the impact that it's having on the brain and the body and the nervous system. And they don't have the lexicon to really grasp what is being spoken of from an esoteric standpoint. And honestly, you guys, if you're a regular here, you know my stance that there is no difference. The body is spiritual. It's not something that we were intended to bypass. And when we understand what's happening to us on a neurobiological standpoint, on a nervous system standpoint, all that does is give us a more full spectrum, broader understanding of what is happening to us in the occult realms and what these forces are looking to do to us and how they want to impact us. And that's why I want to talk about all of it. So I have a slideshow. No one is surprised. If you go and look in the description, I'm going to have it linked. And if you don't want to open the slideshow, that's totally fine. I'm going to cover every single thing that's there. However, I wanted to have this stuff written out in case anybody, and if anybody wanted to share it with someone else or save it for their own records and learning. So on page number 2, because on page number 1, I have just a little cover photo. I have some things listed that talk about what social media has done that has actually impacted us negatively. And the list could be far longer, but I wanted to kind of break it down because I think it's really important to talk about these specific things. And then after this, I'm going to get into the stuff. This will either be very boring to you, or if you are like me, it will be very fascinating to you to hear about what exactly is happening in the brain when we interact with social media, and how does that position us to be mind control? How does it take away our agency? How does it siphon our creativity? How does it shut us down and keep us away from our potential? How does it keep us silent and submissive? I think that stuff is important. The first thing I have on here is that social media, it offers a surrogate for genuine connection. And I do want to have a disclaimer here and say, obviously I use social media. It has been very helpful for me in a lot of ways. And in fact, some of my absolute best friends that I am so lucky to have met and to know, I met through social media, especially Twitter. Years ago, I met so many really incredible people that way and have been able to connect with them in person and develop such deep relationships with them. And that's really special. So I'm not talking about the relationships that we make where we actually follow through and they pour into our day-to-day experience. What I'm talking about here when I talk about it being a surrogate for genuine connection is more so those parasocial relationships that we develop or relationships that we have with people that are pretty much just liking each other's posts. And I do want to also say, some people might argue, well, if I have this relationship with someone where we are mutuals on social media, right, and we just like each other's posts regularly over the course of years, but we never necessarily get to know each other on a deeper level, how is that any different than going into a grocery store and saying hello to the cashier and having a friendly relationship with them, but never developing it on a deeper level. So on one hand, I want to say that I am not suggesting that we need to have all of these extremely deep relationships with the hundreds or thousands of people that we are connected with online. That is not good spiritual hygiene. It is not good hygiene for the nervous system. And so I'm not suggesting that we do that. And I'm not even suggesting that it's wrong to have these mutual relationships with people where we're just liking each other's posts and commenting here and there and being supportive. However, there is a shadow side to that where there is no true mirroring. There is no true nervous system to nervous system contact, body to body contact. We're separated through a screen. And not only is it a screen, but it's a black mirror. It distorts reality because it's not reality. It's a false reality. It's a virtual reality. And so put yourself in the position for a second, and maybe you don't have to, because maybe this is your experience already, of someone who doesn't have any in-person connections. Maybe they have no access to that whatsoever. And their only connections, their only relationships are to people on the internet who they never get to touch. They never hear their voice in person. They never experience that co-regulation of their nervous system sitting side by side with someone. Do you think that in most cases they would say that that's equal to an in-person relationship where the person is right there and you can touch them and you can spend time with them and you can go places with them and you can share with them and you can regulate each other's nervous systems and all of these things? Probably not. It is actually a privilege for those of us who have those relationships to even use as a spectrum of, okay, I have these relationships here that I can mostly depend on and mostly rely on. And over here, I have these relationships that are on the internet, some of which are growing into something deeper, some of which aren't, but I'm not that attached to them. It's really important that we understand that, because there's this epidemic, and you've probably seen it, of people that are getting into relationships that are claiming to be marrying artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. And if you are the kind of person who has strong relationships in your life and people around you, and you feel seen and heard and validated in who you are, this can be very foreign, because it can be difficult to understand the pain and isolation that someone has to be feeling to get to that point where they genuinely feel more understood by something that doesn't have a soul, by something that doesn't have a spirit, because maybe they've been rejected by so many other people in their lives. Maybe they've been really hurt, or maybe they just don't have access to connections with other people. They feel so isolated, right? We don't want to be shaming people for having that experience. It's really important, actually, that we seek to understand it, because I don't know about you, but I have felt extreme loneliness at varying points in my life. And obviously, when I was experiencing that, we didn't have ChatGPT bots that act as people in relationships with you, or even therapy bots or anything like that. And also, I will say I have always personally been very against that kind of thing anyway. So given that, I don't think I would have chosen that. However, I can absolutely relate to and understand why someone would get to that point, So another thing is that it damages our dopamine receptors. We are supposed to wake up and get dopamine from the morning sunlight, and get dopamine from a conversation with a family member, and then go for a run and get dopamine from that, and then eat yummy food and get dopamine from that, and have sex and get dopamine from that. All of those things are supposed to give us this healthy dopamine response. But what happens when social media begins to actually replace and rewire that response? And that is what happens. That is 100% what happens. This is not my opinion. This is science. This is a real thing. You would be hard pressed to find anyone who disagreed with that, because it's kind of just common knowledge at this point in time. Because social media has such an overload of likes and comments and videos of these short form, entertaining, funny, or sometimes terrifying videos that we're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through and getting hit after hit after hit. And you may think, okay, well then I just go into the real world and it's all fine again. But that's not how that works. We go into the real world, and all of these other things that are supposed to bring us dopamine, our dopamine receptors, not only are they going to give us less dopamine for that stuff now, because they know that we can get more dopamine if we just scroll on social media, but then because of that knowledge, the ACC literally rewires us to prioritize social media over these other things. So for some people, you may think, well, why are these people in relationships with ChatGPT when they can just go out and get a girlfriend and have someone that they can have a real relationship with and that they can be intimate with in real life? But even if they did, they most likely would not get the same amount of dopamine that they are getting from these conversations with a chatbot, because by the time you're at the point where you're in a relationship with a chatbot, your dopamine receptors are already going to be so fried that real life cannot compete with that. And that's a terrifying place to be, because that really positions us to be so easy to control and to manipulate, because we are now so disconnected from reality. And in fact, just as an aside, this is what all of this is about. If we cannot speak to what reality is and speak to that in a way that is objective and consistent, and we are just kind of making things up as we go along, because that's what the internet does. You go on the internet and they don't know what a man is. They don't know what a woman is. They can't tell you. They have no idea, because they're disconnected from reality. They are so far from reality. When we lose sight of objective truth, and again, we are all interacting collectively through our phones and laptops and everything through these black mirrors. When we lose sight of objective truth, and then we're entering this world of distortion where everything is incorrectly mirrored. Everything is showing you what you want to see, or it's showing you propaganda. Or, I've always said that media is trauma-based mind control, and social media is the exact same thing, because we're shown all of these horrific videos. It desensitizes us. We're shown all of these funny videos. Then we've forgotten about the murder that we saw 2 reels ago, right? And then we scroll to something else and it's telling us how we should feel about the murder. Then we scroll to something else and it's another funny video, and then it's someone giving advice, and it's all of these different things. It is completely distorting us. And that confusion positions us to be mind controlled, because we cannot be confused and have solid agency. We cannot be disconnected from reality and properly protect ourselves. It's also hypnotic and suggestive. So when we're on Instagram or TikTok and just scrolling and I almost never go on TikTok for this reason. I do have a TikTok, I do post on there, but I very rarely look at anything, because it is so easy to just get hooked and to watch a video, maybe from one of your friends or something, and the next thing you know, you've watched 15 videos in a row, and it's like, oh my gosh, what did I just take in? What was feeding me? Because it is food. Everything that we interact with, we are consuming. And what does our diet look like? What opinions am I taking in all day? What narratives am I taking in all day? What violence am I taking in all day? How are these perceptions and opinions shaping my view of the world? Are they putting me in a state that is more disempowered, where I feel like I don't have any sovereignty? I feel like I'm a professional victim, right? I feel like there's a genocide against me. I feel like I am being attacked, all of these things. When we look at the narratives that are consistently being spread, it is, you are powerless, you're a bad person, you're a chronic victim, all of these things. And if you try, if you dare to speak out about any of that and say, no, that is not true, you will be laughed off the internet so fast. The algorithm often doesn't support it. You'll be shut down. I talk often about cognitive distortions. That is something that has been a special interest of mine, actually, since I was a teenager. And I don't know, some people know this, some people don't, that the way that I entered into the occult and everything like that in general was actually when I was a teenager, and I was a blogger, and I blogged about the Illuminati and things like that, which now that's not the word that I use to describe things. That's not the terminology that I use. However, I also blogged about psychology and things like that. And one of my first, actually it was my first blog on that, was called Perception is Reality. And it was about how our perception shapes our reality, what shapes our perception, all of these things. So I've been on this kick for a while, okay? I have been on this train for a long time, and I still stand by these things. And when I speak about cognitive distortions and I talk about how social media is controlling these things and destroying nuance and getting us into this survival thinking, because that's what cognitive distortions are. They twist our minds. They keep us in this traumatized state where everything is black and white, everything is emotional, everything is, it has to validate how we feel. And that's not reality. It's supposed to be that reality exists. And when our feelings oppose reality, we fix our feelings and we move them back into union with reality. But that's not what we're told to do now. We're told feelings are reality. Feelings trump reality. And actually, when you feel something, then reality no longer matters, right? So we're having all of this suggestive programming. And with that, we are experiencing mind reading via targeted ads from our stolen data. I don't want to scare anyone, but I would very strongly suggest, spending the necessary money and taking the necessary measures to have your data removed from the internet, because there is a very large market for that. And it may seem harmless, but it's not, because our data is everything about us. I refuse to do even something like 23andMe. There's absolutely no way. Curiosity ain't going to kill this cat, because I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. Our privacy in this day and age is our currency. That is all we have. That is how we protect ourselves. And when we willingly give that up again and again and again, every time we give it up, we pay a massive price. A price that we don't even know how much it's going to cost us until it's too late. And that's what's happening. So it can seem at first glance like, oh, well, who cares if Instagram knows that I Googled that, I was going to buy a new vacuum cleaner or something. And then it showed me the exact vacuum cleaner on Instagram. Well, because that is not the only thing that it's paying attention to, okay? It's paying attention to your location when you Google cafes around you. It's paying attention to your health issues and your medical history. When you ask Chat GPT, these questions about different things, that's paying attention to who you're related to and what kinds of things interest you and all of this stuff. And it takes note of that. That takes away our privacy. So I would also suggest, using a VPN or things like that, and just taking any measures that you can to be safe, because it's not paranoid at this point in time. It's really important that we protect ourselves in any way that we can. This is how we keep our agency. If you don't want to be mind controlled, then you have to take control. This is not about fear mongering. This is unfortunately reality. So we can either bypass from that reality and pretend it's not happening and watch as we fall victim to it, or we can educate ourselves so that we can make decisions to be more sovereign, to be more present, to maintain as much of ourselves as possible. Okay, that's important. That's very important. So it also normalizes lack of privacy. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a conversation with someone and they kind of have the mindset of, well, who cares? You know, they have all of our information anyway. And I do understand that mindset because it comes from a place of disempowerment of, well, what can I possibly do about this? How could I possibly change this? But as long as we are acting from that place, again, what are we going to do to actually protect ourselves? Okay, it's almost, if anything, kind of a self-protective mindset emotionally to tell ourselves there's nothing that we can do about it, because it can feel very daunting to know that we are up against these government figures that have all of this technology and want to use it to control us, to harm us, to bring us into a surveillance state, to essentially make us prisoners of them, right? So that's a terrifying pill to swallow. That is a scary reality, but we don't have to live in fear, okay? Because, you know, I believe in God, obviously. And I know this video is not necessarily a spiritual video. However, I believe that God gives us authority over all of these things. And that doesn't mean that these things do not impact us, but it does mean that when we are following the path of Christ, this is my belief, and this is how I see it, that a way will be made for us when it seems impossible. Okay, this has been my experience with different things. Abnormal exposure to feedback equals overload and dissociation. So this is especially prevalent with negative feedback. I don't know about you, but I definitely know what it's like to post a hot take on TikTok and have thousands and thousands and thousands of negative comments. I blew up quite a bit on TikTok over the election, and some of my TikToks were actually on the news. Lucky me. And it was, you know, one of those things where you never blow up with the things that you want to blow up. At least that has been my experience. And so I had, when I say hundreds of thousands of negative comments, that were just, and I mean, they're probably 50% or more bots, because we know that's really prevalent too. They have entire bot farms where they basically set up all of these phones to shoot out these, you know, randomized insults and arguments and things like that on people's posts, and it's all AI. And it's just engagement farming, and it's really disturbing that they do that. But yeah, so the nervous system was not, it was never developed to have that kind of feedback. I mean, back in the day, unless you were a king or something like that, the reality that you would ever be in a circumstance where all of these people, you know, thousands of people were spewing hatred at you all at one time was incredibly rare and not very likely to happen. Okay, so that is not something that we have been biologically created to experience. The body does not have capacity for that. This is not part of our biology. And so because of that, the nervous system actually becomes very overloaded and shuts down. And the only response when we continue having that experience is to dissociate. That is the body's natural protection from these kinds of experiences. So when we have that repeatedly, that's what happens. Neural pathways rewired around a false virtual reality. So again, not only is this not reality, this social media reality, but we're also rewiring our neural pathways around this feedback that we're getting, around the media programming that we're seeing all the time, around these parasocial relationships that we have with other people and with these influencers. And our brains and bodies and nervous systems actually begin to respond significantly more to those experiences than they would to our real life experiences, which is really terrifying to think about, because that is ultimately the goal, right? Is to release your individuality, to release your real life, and to join the hive mind, to fall in line with everybody else. And it's under the guise of pleasure. It's under the guise of escape or of a game. And people, they use social media often to wind down, to connect, to have fun. And they don't even think about the fact that our real life, our day-to-day life, is falling apart at the seams in response to this. That so many people, they don't have relationships in their life, they don't have anything fun to go do, they don't have community, anything like that. And so they turn to social media as the answer for those things, not even understanding that social media is causing so many of those problems. And that isolates us. And it's a surrogate for genuine connection. So not only are we being significantly more isolated and we're losing our community, but simultaneously we're sold the lie that this is actually solving that problem. Because before you didn't have friends, and now you have 26 followers on Twitter. So look at you, now you have friends on Reddit, and the problem is offering us the solution, is what's happening here. And isolated people are significantly easier to control. It also impairs our ability to judge our priorities. This goes again with the ACC, that the ACC teaches us how to actually allocate the resources that we have from a neurochemical and nervous system perspective, to be able to manage them and make certain decisions. So for example, if I'm scrolling on TikTok and the fire alarm goes off, then the ACC would switch my gears if it's acting properly and say, hey, the fire alarm is going off, so you need to put TikTok down and you need to go and see what's going on. But the ACC is becoming significantly impaired through this chronic social media usage, which is leading to people neglecting their children or neglecting their pets, neglecting their marriage, really disturbing behaviors because their dopamine receptors are now prioritizing social media. And then also the degradation of memory formation, which, leads to dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. So on slide number 3, and I'm already speaking longer than I wanted to, so I'm gonna try and keep this, gonna try and go fast because I have a tendency to go long. The impact of social media on the brain, and this slide is all about emotion and self-control. So this is getting into, again, this is either going to be boring to you or fascinating to you, getting into what is actually happening in the brain. Because why do we have these bodies? They belong to us. We are with these bodies every single day, and we don't know what's happening inside of them. We don't know what the neurochemical processes are of certain situations. We don't know what is happening to us when we experience certain things, and that's not okay. So we're gonna get into it. We have the subgenual anterior cingulate, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and this is like the brakes for your emotions. So I wrote down too much scrolling equal dinner breaks equal harder to stop urges or calm down. And I'm trying to make all of this as simplistic as possible because I took medical neurology and I have several textbooks on neurobiology, medical neurology, all of those things. And let me just tell you that the language is significantly more complex. Okay, so it's not that I think anyone is stupid, but I want this to be accessible genuinely. Then we also have the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the ACC, and that is the traffic cop for focus and decisions, heavy multitasking. So on here I have switching apps, tabs, notifications, weakens it so you get more distracted. And that's what I'm talking about when I say I am, I'm on Instagram watching a funny reel and I have a baby and the baby's crying because it wants food. And the ACC, when it's working properly, is going to switch those gears so that I come out of that dissociative, hypnotic state that social media puts us in. And I say, okay, that's done, enough of that. Now I'm going to go feed the baby. But what's happening is that people are having this ACC become so weakened that they are prioritizing things that should not be prioritized over things that are significantly more important. So there's also the dorsal and rostral ACC. This is the part that notices conflicts. So this is, I should study, but TikTok looks fun. And this is similar to the ACC, but it's just a part of it. Social feeds pull on it constantly, making it more reactive because everything is always updating. It's always something new. Someone has a new video out, someone posts every Tuesday, or maybe everyone's talking about a certain post and you're seeing all these notifications coming up on your phone. And so the constant, I'm doing this activity and now I'm all of a sudden switching to social media. I am grocery shopping, but grocery shopping can also mean I check Instagram while I'm, grocery shopping because I got a notification that someone liked this, or maybe I'm on a walk and I decide to check Instagram or Twitter or something. And, now I'm with family, but I'm checking notifications every single time we do that. It is weakening our impulse control, which takes us into slide number 4, impulse and decision making. So the OFC, which is the orbitofrontal cortex, is involved in decision making. So what is worth it and what's not worth it, and how we determine that worth. The smaller the OFC volume equals more actions that do not align with our integrity, meaning that the things that we mark, this is worth it versus this is not worth it, it becomes so, our ability to determine that becomes so weak that we are no longer able to act in ways that honor our integrity or that line up with our personal value system. So one explanation of this could be, I'm the kind of person who always prioritizes studying. That's really important to me. Or I want to get home and I want to finish my work first thing. I want to wake up in the morning and I want to get all of my chores done first. That way I can enjoy the rest of the day. However, if we're constantly prioritizing social media and, instead of studying, I'm going to scroll. Instead of working, I'm going to check these messages on social media. Instead of cleaning in the morning, I'm going to scroll and check my notifications and things like that. Our integrity begins to change because what we are marking as worth it no longer seems worth it because we are not receiving as much reward as we would like to receive. And this is very disturbing because we have become lab rats and not even realized it. Why are we abandoning our lives to sit on a screen and scroll and scroll and scroll? It is actually so dystopian when you think about it, to think about living in a house and having pets or having children or having a spouse and having friends that you could go meet up with and, having hobbies and cooking and all of these things. And it's like, this is infiltrating every single one of those things to the point where it is significantly disconnecting us from reality. That is disturbing. And this is not something we need to emotionally shame ourselves about if this is happening to you. I'm covering these things so that we know, oh, I'm not just some weak person. It's not that there's something wrong with me. My body is responding normally to overstimulation, to overload, to ingenuine social connection, to trauma-based mind control. This is a normal physiological response, okay? We need to understand that so we can take our power back and we can take our agency back. We also have the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, controls all of our executive functions, okay? The prefrontal cortex is the first thing to shut down when we are in survival mode. This is our planning, multitasking, decision-making, memory, social behavior, etc. Social media overloads the prefrontal cortex and forms neural pathways according to the most rewarded activity. So again, our neural pathways that are supposed to, and our neural pathways, this is what builds our daily habits. This is what builds our emotional states, what builds our mental stability. And it is being completely eroded, and all of our neural pathways are being rewired and rebuilt around social media that is like completely chaotic, unhinged, violent, filled with propaganda, all this stuff every single day. And that is training our minds. It is entraining our minds, and it is entraining our nervous systems, and it is initiating us into states of fear. Consistent states of fear. We really, really, really need to understand this, and we're going to talk about that a lot more in part 2 when we talk about the esoteric side of things as well. But so this is forming them according to the most rewarded activity. So high reward compels us to prioritize social media, again, because it is releasing significantly more dopamine than sex, more dopamine than exercise, more dopamine than caffeine or chocolate, more dopamine than, cuddles with your kids, more dopamine than a phone call with your family member, more dopamine than a massage or, any of this stuff. It's like a drug, literally. It gives you more dopamine than nicotine would. It's probably up there with, if not more dopamine than cocaine or something like that. And that is highly, highly addictive. So the ways that we're responding to this is normal, but that is why we need significant boundaries, because this is setting us up for mind control. Every time that we log on to an app and we scroll and scroll and scroll, we are entering a theta hypnotic state, which is then submerging us in all of this propaganda, in all of these narratives that have nothing to do with reality, in all of these feelings over facts posts that they really appeal to our emotional reasoning, which is a cognitive distortion. This is, again, when we base reality off of our emotions instead of the other way around. That is building a house on sinking sand, because it's always going to change. It's never going to be consistent. We have no foundation, and everything built on that will fail. It's very important that we understand that. And then also, the hippocampus supplies context that allows us to evaluate options and imagine outcomes before making a decision. So making a decision feeds overwhelm. It feeds overwhelm the hippocampus with emotionally charged and fragmented posts. Feeds and overwhelms is, I think, what I meant to say there. So everything that we see is significantly emotionally charged. It's overwhelming. It is intended to steal our agency by taking us from a grounded and stable place and shooting out so much information that is highly emotionally charged, that is subjective, but is also being promoted as reality. All of these confusing, changing narratives, which, by the way, is a CIA tactic that is called controlled perception. And the goal is to confuse us to the point where we don't know what is real and what isn't anymore. And that just dissociates us from reality. It dissociates us from our own bodies. It puts us in a state where we don't trust anyone. We don't trust what our eyes see, what our ears hear anymore, because we've been fed so many lies. Well, what do you think that sets us up for? Mind control and being in a position to be completely destroyed through tyranny, because we don't have a backbone anymore, because it has melted in fear. And we don't know how to protect ourselves, because when the prefrontal cortex is chronically shut down, we can't access logic. We can't even think how to get ourselves out of the experiment. We're totally just trapped within it. On slide number 5, the impact of social media on the brain. This is the social motivation system. So liking on social media is a reward that triggers wanting, which is a motivation, aka abuse of dopamine, cortisol spikes, and withdrawal impact motivation. So again, the constant receiving of likes and comments, it triggers a reward in the brain that says, I did good. So say someone posts a video and it's actually something where they are exposing themselves in some inappropriate way, or, harming themselves, possibly, something like that. And they have all of these comments saying, oh my gosh, that was so funny. You should do that again, or you should keep doing this. And we see this a lot with OnlyFans and women who continue to put themselves in more and more and more abusive situations and scenarios, because of the fact that they are receiving so much dopamine from all of these men who are saying more, do it again. And it's triggering this reward system that has already been completely screwed up by social media. And that is impacting people's motivation, and they are more likely to repeat that behavior because they have been told by thousands of people online that this is the behavior they should be doing. And that also, again, messes with our prioritization and leads us to prioritize constant posting, which is exactly what the makers of social media want you to do. They want you to post constantly, to be scrolling constantly, to be in competition with other people who are doing what you're doing, so that you're always out there trying to make new things, using their platform to promote yourself. And that's one reason why I will have nothing to do with any of that whatsoever. And because of that, I approach everything I'm doing like it's my job. And I try and prepare a presentation and a lecture that I think is going to be very educational and helpful. And I do not even give myself the opportunity to just put out video content on YouTube just about any topic, because this is important to me. I don't want it to be tainted by social media culture, not when this is so important to me. And that's really how we should be interacting with this stuff, is we have to ask ourselves, what is my motivation? Why am I sharing this? Why am I posting this? Sometimes you just have a day where you're on a roll, or something that I've been doing a lot recently is I had deleted my Twitter account a year ago, and then about a month and a half ago, I brought it back. But I had downloaded all of my old tweets. So now I can set it up to just shoot out like 3 of my old tweets in one day. And then I'll go in, and add another one that's more recent or something. But that way I can be consistent, but it's just reusing old material. And you'll see a lot of people actually doing that who want to post consistently. But I mean, we're human. It's not normal to be sitting there and shooting out content 24/7. This is where you see people using ChatGPT and things to try and keep up, and really losing and sacrificing their integrity in the process, because there's now this obsession of being in the rat race with everyone else. So we also have simulated rewards and punishments, which are active in the anterior cingulate cortex and the ACC, that report higher responses than in-person connection. So I'm going to say that again. simulated rewards and punishments. This means likes and comments, whatever, rewards and punishments online, on social media, report higher responses than in-person connections, with perceived punishment registering so high that it's similar to physical pain. That is huge. Because again, this is overloading the nervous system. This is far past the capacity of what we have evolved to handle. It's not normal. It's not the way we are intended to live. It's outside of that. Social engagement is essential for healthy human functioning and immune function, cognitive health, etc. But simulated social engagement provides all of the negative with very little of the positive. If you are not building connections on social media, through social media, that then translate into real connections where you have a real, genuine relationship with someone, which again, you can't have a relationship with every person, but at least having some of those is so important, and making it a point to try and use this platform to connect with people as authentically as possible. Now on to slide number 6, nervous system dysfunction. We're still talking about the social motivation system here. Inconsistent simulated social responses trigger an increase in hypervigilance. So just to put this in layman's terms, when we go on social media every day and we have an interaction with someone and it's positive, and then an hour later we have a conversation with someone through comments or something and it's very negative and they're attacking us or being very rude, and then someone likes one of our posts and comments and says, "You look so pretty in this photo," and then right after that we get a DM from someone and it's completely unhinged and they're telling us that we should harm ourselves, or that they hate us, or they hate our post, or whatever. This inconsistent simulated social response triggers an increase in hypervigilance, which spikes cortisol and triggers a chronic sympathetic state. This is literally MK Ultra simulated through social media, and it has more of an effect than even a soft bullying experience in person, because it's magnified by so many other people, by the fact that being on your phone or on your computer is already a dysregulating experience, because the nervous system it's electric and it's going to attune itself to whatever it is that we're regularly around. So if you're around plants a lot, or the earth, and you're going outside and you're always in nature, then you're going to be attuned to that. If you're around other people all the time and they're regulated and or they know how their nervous systems have a lot of capacity, they know how to have intense emotions and to bring it back around, and they're stable people, then your nervous system will reflect that. But if you're around people who are very unstable, then that starts to impact your nervous system too. And social media is no different. It's also electricity, but it's positive, not negative. And in this case, when I'm saying that it's positive, what I actually mean is that it's negative, because a positive electric charge is going to be negative to the body. Felt social safety becomes tied to likes and comments. I'm pretty sure we've probably all felt this at one point or another. Or other forms of social media engagement promoting disconnection and reducing correct relational mirroring. We cannot have correct relational mirroring through a screen. That just can't happen. I don't know about you, but I have definitely had the experience multiple times. And I have noticed that in person, I don't tend to have very many misunderstandings with people. But when I do have a misunderstanding with people where they just completely misread my intentions, or there seems to be all of this weird projection, it's online. It's online the majority of the time. I have actually experienced that very rarely in person. And I think that's interesting. It makes me wonder if you've had that experience and what that has been like for you. But again, it's because there's this disconnect between our nervous systems and we're engaging in this very dysregulating way and it's inconsistent and you're not that your mirror neurons they're not being activated. You're not looking in someone's eyes. You're not touching them. You're not feeling their nervous system. And so we fill in the blanks from this anxious, sympathetic state. And that really impairs us. It does keep us in a state of hypervigilance, which is chronic survival mode. Once we are in that chronic survival mode, I'm going to repeat myself again. The frontal lobe becomes impaired. The prefrontal cortex shuts down. We are only operating out of cognitive distortions because we no longer have access to logic, memory, cause and effect. We don't know how to regulate ourselves. We can't separate reality from illusion. We can't separate, what am I feeling versus what are the facts telling me? It all becomes jumbled. It's one large confusing mess, and it severely impacts our relationships. And it's really sad too, because we could have these kinds of experiences with people who are very good people, but or maybe we're the one doing it. Maybe we are the one projecting or something and being triggered in that way and not even realizing it. And that is why it is so important to have a life outside of this. That is why it's so important to understand how we are being impacted so that we can be more aware. We can have more self-awareness and say, is this a genuine reaction? Is this how I actually feel? Do I know for certain that that's how they meant this? Or am I just kind of projecting that? Am I making these weird assumptions because I'm on edge all the time from having this constant negative or emotionally charged, these constant emotionally charged interactions on social media? It changes people. I have seen this. It changes people. And it changes their ability to relate to you as another human being. It puts a wall between you where you're no longer a person to them. You are now reduced to whatever traits, you're reduced and simplified to whatever traits they have decided to assign to you. And we've all probably done this to another person as well. The freeze or play dead response evolved to accommodate isolation and protect us when we had no community safety. Chronic social media use mirrors this isolation regardless of daily interactions, meaning daily interactions on social media. And that is, again, because it puts us into a freeze state. And instead of protecting us, it gets us in chronic dissociation. And it really negatively impacts us. So slide number 7, hypnotic suggestions and mind control. So this is where we're going to get into a little bit more of this, but it's things that I've already covered as well. Inconsistent simulated social responses trigger an increase in hypervigilance, which, spikes cortisol and triggers that chronic sympathetic state. And so once that happens, what's happening is that we are basically in a war mentality. We are in a mentality that easily becomes us versus them. And it makes us so much easier to control because when we are in this state of hypervigilance, we're looking for what's wrong so that we can fix it. We're looking for the evil around us that needs to be corrected. And this is why in 1984, when they have the 2-minute hate, everyone is starved, they're isolated, they have no accommodations whatsoever, they're living in filth. and their day-to-day life has been stripped of all joys to the point where the only joy that they really have in their day is these few moments where they get to project all of their hatred over where they're at in their life onto this one fictional character who has been chosen to be on the receiving end of all of this hate. And this is what's happening to us every single day is we feel disconnected, we feel dissociated, we're in a chronic survival state, we are just where we are lacking community, we're lacking relational mirroring, we aren't having our mirror neurons activated, which is resulting in a lack of felt safety within the body. And it makes us want to find someone to blame. And when we don't know who to blame because we don't know what we are actually up against, and the fact that all of this is targeted and all of this is intentional, what happens is that we will look to social media to see, who do I actually need to blame for this? And it changes all the time. We just recently had an experience with someone being assassinated and all of these people celebrating this person's assassination, which I do not agree with. I don't think we should be celebrating anyone's assassination. And I know this is a hot take, but I personally believe that God gives life and God takes away life, and that any human who does that is committing a sin against God. I do not believe that that's something that is ever justifiable. That's my take. You can have a different take, but that's mine. And it is highly disturbing to me because you're seeing all of these people who, many of which probably never listened to any of the messages or the words of this person whose life was taken. He doesn't have a life anymore. His wife does not have a husband anymore. His children do not have a father anymore. And so many of these people just jumping on a bandwagon saying that they hate this person that they knew nothing about because this person has become the face of everything that's wrong with the world. And that is what is happening to us on a regular basis through social media. So we also have, the mindless scrolling inducing hypnotic states, which triggers theta waves. Theta waves are also released when we are sleeping or when we are in a very, very deep trance state, just to kind of paint a picture of why this is problematic, because we're getting into that state and then becoming significantly more susceptible to suggestion and propaganda. And if we do not do our own research on top of setting boundaries around our use of social media, on top of prioritizing the health of our body and nervous system, then we are going to remain very susceptible. These states trigger chemical responses that emit certain frequencies. And this is really important to understand because this relates to technology that actually takes advantage of those states in order to move us into an even deeper state where we are actively responding to stimuli that we don't even know that we are receiving. So if social media or media in general are being used to align with these frequencies to deepen their impact, their goal will be to keep these states active at all costs. So what I'm saying is that there is technology that emits certain frequencies, okay? And in order for you to be affected by it, your mind, your brain needs to, and your nervous system needs to be aligned with those frequencies. This sounds crazy. It's not crazy. This is real technology. And so in order for that to happen, there has to be something that is triggering those states, right? And it's not enough, if I were to meditate or get into a deep trance state and these theta waves become active, I'm still not in a suggestive state unless I'm in that state while, scrolling through these different narratives or this different propaganda. And that's the difference. Because if we're looking at something like MK Ultra, it's not enough to just be hypnotized. It's not enough to just be in this state. What is the goal of that state? What are they actually trying to achieve? And so when everything that's being pushed to us on social media it's pushing violence, it's pushing dissociation, it's pushing hopelessness and helplessness, it's pushing fear, it's pushing disconnection from God, all of these things, disconnection from other people, and getting everyone into this mindset where we genuinely are starting to say and believe things like, yeah, assassination is completely okay. That's fine. You know, it happened outside of the judicial system, but who cares? That's completely fine. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, that is what happens when we get into these hypnotic trance-like states and allow whatever to be poured into us, and we don't have our own thoughts and opinions anymore. They're aligned with this propaganda and this narrative that is coming through. So clickbait, psyops, trauma-based mind control, etc., are used to create certain mental and spiritual states through nervous system manipulation and maintain these states in order to maintain power and control. That is the most important information that I could possibly give you, alongside the understanding that connecting with the body and the nervous system and connecting with God is what will protect us and give us sovereignty during these times. It will return our power to us. It will return our agency to us. Again, we talk about all of these things that we've talked about in this video, not to live in a state of fear, but because we cannot be naive. We can't bypass what's happening. It's happening either way, okay? But if we understand what's happening, if we know what's happening in our minds and our nervous systems and our bodies, if we know what their agendas are and their goals are, then we can choose to do something different, okay? And we can set boundaries, and we can prioritize the health of our minds and of our nervous systems. And we can say to ourselves, if this is all the crap that I'm taking in every day, you know, what can I do to nourish myself now? What can I take in that's going to nourish me, that's going to inspire me, that's going to bring me closer to truth, that's going to edify my soul and make me feel closer to God, and just make me a more sovereign being overall. Because everything that we take in, it's all consumption. And everything we consume, it's making us healthier or it's making us sicker. And we need to be mature enough as adults, as human beings, to assess that honestly, to look at that honestly and say, these are the areas where I am healthy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And these are the areas where I'm sick, right? You know, maybe I need to set some boundaries here. I need to change my habits here. And I also want to say, I have a lecture on neural alchemy and brain retraining that I'm going to link below as well. And I'm pretty sure it's just called Neural Alchemy, but I'm pulling it up now to be on the safe side. Yeah, Neural Alchemy, Brain Retraining, Trauma, and Occult Science. So I'm going to link that below as well, because if you are feeling discouraged and you want some practical, easy tools to actually protect yourself from these things and from this mind control, then that lecture really goes extremely in depth. Think of it as advanced somatic experiencing alongside just an occult perspective of things, because it is occult anatomy, and it's important that we see it that way. And that being said, thank you so much for bearing with me through all of this brain talk. I hope that you found it as fascinating as I do. I hope that it inspired you to maybe make some changes if necessary. I know that it does for me. And if you have any questions, you know, before I record the part 2 on how this impacts us from an occult standpoint. I'm going to be talking about egregores. I'm going to be talking about the eighth sphere. I'm going to be talking about Ahriman and all of these other things. And I'm excited about that. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions about that, and I will do my best to answer it in there. And I appreciate you being here with me. Until next time, have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening.